Welcome to Charlotte and Brass and the coffee cart build, destined for an office space. I started this project with a lot of enthusiasm, as you can see, which was quickly dampened by the realization that my original design called for multiple loops of pipe, which is impossible unless you have this little nugget of a piece, which looked like the dropping from a robotic deer, which was not the look I was going for. So I redesigned the whole thing, reordered some pipes and fittings, and began anew. Because you cannot paint galvanized pipe straight from the box, you have to start by washing it with a degreaser, and after it's completely dried out, rinsing it with vinegar, which improves adhesion, or so my research on the interweb said. My metal instantly rusted, so the primer I got was specifically for rusty things. After priming the whole setup, I then did a few coats of metal-specific matte black spray paint. Now that I had the dimensions of my pipe framing, I knew the exact size I wanted my shelves to be and could start milling down the lumber. I used Doug fir on this project to match the aesthetics of the office where the piece was headed. After ripping everything down to width, I then sent it all through my benchtop joiner, which worked as long as I was creative and light on my toes. After choosing grain orientation and board layout, every board was labeled according to its location, and then cutting to length. I cut everything about 2 inches longer than the final cut because this girl likes wiggle room. Due to the material I was working with, I had to join some boards end to end, which is one of the weakest joints there is. Because I would be doweling the shelves together, I didn't need this joint to be incredibly strong per se, I just needed it to be lined up. So I grabbed the dowel jig and dowels and got started. I used 1/2 inch by 3 inch fluted dowels for this project, and when I drilled the holes, I drilled down half the length of the dowel and then added 1/8 to 1/4 inch on each side, as I will always go with a slightly deeper hole than a shallower one. I also prefer fluted dowels to spiral dowels because of how easily the glue can escape the hole when the dowel is pounded in. With the spiral ones, I found the glue can kind of trap air and have a hard time letting that air escape, and it can be difficult to seat the dowel. On the first board, make sure you get your depth rock solid and spend some extra time really dialing it in because this will determine if your glue up process proceeds as smoothly as the face of Half Dome or as roughly as a bison's coat. Factoid, the skin of a bison toughens as temperatures drop. Who knew? Gluing these boards on the long run was decidedly unsexy, mostly because I did not have clamps that were long enough and it was very difficult to keep them from bowing up. However, with multiple clamps, straps, paint cans, and the correct AC/DC song in the background, it actually ended up working out perfectly. So, not having the perfect tool actually created the perfect opportunity for ingenuity. And this is what I mean by ingenuity. Sleek and perfect? No. Effective and producing excellent results? Yes. I rest my case. I doweled this thing to within an inch of its life, and I am certain you could put a hippopotamus or 750 jars of peanut butter on one of these slabs and there would be zero deflection. In retrospect, I would cut down my use of dowels in half, or even more. After marking all the dowel points, it was time to start drilling. Always making sure that your dowel jig is on the same face of the workpiece, always the top or always the bottom. This ensures that you have one smooth face at the end. Now, a dowel jig is pretty simple. It's like a small portable bench press or the alternative to a biscuit joiner. The main thing is consistency and lining up your centers all the time. As I approached the actual glue up, I called in the heavies, and Pop showed up. Yeah, Pops. Now, if you ever want to see how a friend or family member reacts under pressure, start a big project and let there be glue involved. This will tell you all you need to know. Anyhow, we were able to get the whole slab glued and clamped in about 20 minutes start to finish. And because the depths of my hole was dialed in, there was no yanking a board off to re-drill or cutting off the end of a dowel. No, ma'am. We used cauls, Cauls, covered in wax paper to prevent the glue from sticking to the boards, and it worked like a charm. With cauls on the top and bottom of the workpiece, it prevents bowing and applies even pressure distribution. A caul is also a type of animal fat that is used to make casings for sausage and the like. What a day of learning. I'll leave that one there to percolate for a little bit. After 24 hours of dry time, clamps were taken off and all three slabs were loaded up with deep squats and great back protection and taken to a millwork shop across town where they were sent through a 48-inch planer and drum sander, thereby flattened to just over an inch and a half and sanded to 120 grit. Upon return, they looked like different pieces of wood entirely. With the slabs rough draft ready, it was time to trim to length and width, final length and width, which I accomplished using my 55-inch track saw. No bevel, no problem. Just a 90-degree cut. Super fresh. Okay, because I don't have the super fancy clamp specific to this track saw, asterisk, yet, I just use hand clamps and pony clamps and readjust from time to time. And for this project, it worked just fine. For the edges, I used a 1/4-inch roundover bit and then hit every inch of wood at 120 grit and discovered a little tree creature emerging from the back of shelf number 2. Precious. Immediately following the tree creature was my discovery of a few sap pockets. Not so precious. The little ones I was able to hit with a heat gun until the sap stopped flowing, but there were a few larger ones that were too deep. So it was time to do some patchwork. I cut a patch 1 3/4 inches wide by 3 inches long and 3/4 of an inch thick. Using some double-sided tape on some scrap I had laying around, I built a guide square for my plunge router. I hit the corners with my chisel, with the guide square still in place, and then routed out the rest of the sap pocket until I had removed all of it. Then I took my patch, glued and tapped it in, and used some sawdust over the seam to blend it as best I could. After a 24-hour dry time, I hit the patch with my planer, belt sander, and orbital sander at 120 again to make every surface equal at 120, which sounds like a good band name, equal at 120. You may have heard the term raising the grain or hitting the whiskers or knocking the scuff. That last one is mine. You're welcome. They are all euphemisms for getting rogue wood grain fibers to stand up and reveal themselves prior to putting finish on the piece. After hitting everything with 120, I did some misting, waited for it to dry, and then sanded again. As you can see, all sorts of little weirdies appeared after this spritzing, and if this step had been skipped, they would have shown up with my first coat of finish. No good. So the basic rule of sanding increment is to increase by no more than half of the previous grit. So I went 120, 180, 220, ended at 320. Because Doug fir is a little sappier than other species, I opted to do 1 coat of clear shellac to seal the wood, followed by 5 coats of quick-drying polyurethane. In between coats, I did a light hand sand with 600 grit, followed by a wipe down with a tack cloth. It removed any dust or fine debris, prior to the next layer of poly. With the shelves finished, it was time to attach the pipe framing using threaded inserts. The main thing to know is that you want to countersink them a scotch, you want your hole to be slightly deeper than the actual insert, and there is no play with this setup. So they need to be dead on. I needed some more play, so I ended up expanding the holes in my flanges, and it cured about 98% of my woes. Because I did not have a portable tabletop drill press contraption, I jimmy rigged my tabletop bench press and it worked just fine. After hours of drilling and getting everything in place, it is simply assembly. There is so much to say about threaded inserts that an entire YouTube video will be coming your way soon that is purely and surely only about threaded inserts. Side note, painter's tape does remove polyurethane, so skip it. The specs on this project are as follows. I used 3-inch swivel casters with total lock brakes in black polyurethane. The threaded inserts for the casters were 5/16 by 18.5 inch long. The screws for the casters were stainless steel panhead with a hex drive 3/4 inch long. The threaded inserts used for the frame were 1/4 by 20.5 inch long. The screws for the frame were stainless steel with a standard countersunk head and a hex drive 1/2 inch long. I used 3/4 inch galvanized pipe, then primed with metal primer and painted matte black. The coffee cart was 72 inches long, 39 inches tall, and 24 inches wide. After planing and sanding the planks, they ended up being 1 5/8 inch thick. I finished with 1 coat of shellac and multiple coats of polyurethane with a 600 grit sand in between, then hit with a tack cloth. Both the shellac and polyurethane were applied with a thick foam brush. Thank you for spending your time watching this video today. I'd be interested to see what you build next. So comment and leave a pic of your latest work if you feel so inclined. And if you're interested in a piece of custom furniture for home or office, send me a message. And happy building!